I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. 1798. That's when we had real politicians that said, we're not going to play games. We have to go back to 1798.
So that is Donald Trump once again invoking that he's going to use this ancient law that has only ever been used in wartime and brought to you great moments in American history like the internment of the Japanese. And it is horrible for any politician to invoke that history and to imply that a law like that could be the solution to our problems. But it seems especially bad that he clearly is not really familiar with it. That he's like getting the first number wrong, and then he's like stopping the teleprompter to say, imagine that, because he's only imagining. He doesn't actually know about it. I think that if you're gonna be a fascist dictator, you should at least know the material. I don't think you should just be able to phone it in. But anyway, he's hearkening back to 1798 when men were men, and oh man, you follow one of those 1798 men into a shower and oh man, elephant trunk. Oh, we need to get back to that, America. And so the interesting thing is Donald Trump, in saying that he's going to save America, which is obviously entirely controlled by Guatemalan gangs. I think we all know that. That's like red meat for his base. But the red meat doesn't really seem to be working with some of his base. And here is, I believe, Harry Enten to explain what I mean.
It's been a key demographic for him. It's been his base. And this is what's so interesting, because we've seen so many groups this year moving in Donald Trump's direction. So you would think his core group, his base of support would be doing the same. But in fact, it's moving a little bit away from him. So this is Trump's margin with non-college white voters. Unlike most voting blocs, this group is not moving towards him. It's actually moving slightly away. So you go back 8 years ago, he won him by 33. You go back 4 years ago, he won him by 31. Now what we look is we see that in the latest average of polls, he's only up by 27. Now that may not seem like a lot, but given that we're seeing these double-digit gains, say among black voters or among Hispanic voters in some of the polls, the fact that we're seeing this core group of supporters actually moving away from him, not just off of the 2016 baseline, but the 2020 baseline as well, I think that's a rather interesting development.
Shrinkage, as Donald Trump might say, based on what he said the last few days.
A storm is tearing up the digital media industry. Only our audience can save us in these difficult times. Help us reach our goal of 100,000 new members at tyt.com/team.
It's nice when people in the news get to have a little fun as a treat with the shrinkage thing, but that is interesting. I had not expected to see that he would be slipping among that like one group who is supposedly always been behind him, but I guess the slippage had begun even in 2020. And they focus, we're going to get into why this matters and how it matters in the swing states in just a sec. But Yaz, I wanted your thoughts about 1798 and apparently some non-college educated voters or white voters are not buying it anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, the whole thing with the dictators and the internment camps and all of that is very, very interesting to me because, I mean, of course, Trump is going to say things like that because everyone knows that he wants to be a dictator. He has said it himself. That's not us just putting words into his mouth. God knows we don't need to do that. But it's the people who cheer for him whenever he says things like that, right? If he is so ill-informed, I can't imagine that the people in his audience cheering for the things that he says that are truly terrifying actually understand the context of that either. Now, speaking of, we saw that he is dwindling. He's losing a lot of support with non-college educated white people in not only across the country, but specifically in those swing states. Yeah. And I think it was like the Great Lakes region specifically. And that is very encouraging because where he is losing support, Kamala Harris is picking up that support, and they are a huge voting bloc. They're, I think, the single biggest voting demographic in this country. So it's a big, big deal.
Yeah. So, why don't we show this next clip and then you can continue. They're going to sort of show some of the numbers to the point that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Why can a small difference with this group matter? Because look at what percentage of the electorate that they make up. So we can look nationally, right? Look at this. Non-college white voters make up 40% of the electorate. That's more than college whites at 29%. All other groups, voters of color at 28%. So this is something that we've seen throughout the board, right? Which is that Donald Trump is making huge gains with groups that make up a smaller percentage of the electorate while he's losing a little bit. But these groups that he's losing a little bit of make up a much larger portion of the electorate. But more than that, we're talking about the US of A, where they make up 40%. Why don't you go to those key Great Lake battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? They have outsized import in those Great Lake battleground states. Non-college white voters, look at this. They make up the slim majority of voters at 51%.
And so, as you were saying, it's not just a problem nationally. It's especially a problem in some of the states that he does not need more problems. But continue.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly my point. I think I got a little bit ahead of Harry Enten there in my commentary, but I think it is very telling that he's losing the support with these people who have been so traditionally for Donald Trump. I'm not sure exactly the reason or the cause for this shift, and they don't really get into that. It's just this is what it is, and this is what is happening. And it's not just something that's happening now, which I think is also very significant. This has been happening, this has been an ongoing trend since his first time running for president in 2016. He had whatever he had, however much support he had then, it has dropped by about 5 or 6 points, not just nationally, but also in those specific states. And for Kamala Harris, she has been losing support with other traditionally Democratic voting groups, but those groups aren't as big as this particular one. So wherever she's losing it, she's making up that support with a much bigger and more significant voting group, more significant specifically in the states where she would need to win if she wants to win the Electoral College.
Yeah. And by the way, as they continue, they show the actual breakdown in those states. He is, again, like 2024, 2020, or 2016, 2020, 2024, he is gradually dropping off in the same way in those states as he did nationally. And so he obviously needs them. He needs as many of them as he can get. And I would love to see more analysis as to why they're dropping off or which other demographic variables might be intersecting with them being non-college educated white. But in any event, it's not good news for him. And we'll see how he responds. The issue is that he's not a very stable person. To the extent that he finds out about this, I assume that his response will probably be something that is deeply worrying.